I've been seeing more and more electric bikes lately come with a mobile app. And my first impression is I never want to be stuck with an e-bike that requires a mobile app to work. I don't want to have to pull out my phone. I don't want to have to worry about if it's charged or not in order to ride my bike. On the other hand, I've had some thoughts recently on what would make some e-bike mobile apps really awesome. Now, I can't take credit for all of these ideas because as I'm getting bikes for review, I'm seeing the technology that different companies are implementing, and it's just giving me, I feel like, a glimpse of what is to come. So here are my thoughts on what would make the perfect mobile app for electric bikes. If I'm missing any features, please let me know in the comments what you think could be done. I feel like this is a whole brand new area that's just being explored. And one of the things I'm surprised about is that some of these new bikes with these apps don't cost anymore because, of course, software, you create it once, you include it in the cost. Maybe they have some sort of recurring model where it gives them more revenue. Maybe they put ads in the app. I don't know. I just think it can be done without adding to the cost of the bike itself, or at least not adding significantly. And I think some of the benefits we can get can far outweigh that. But lately, in the last several weeks, some of the things I've seen are apps that allow you to exercise. So that was a new one. The Freebeat Morph was an e-bike that actually can turn into a stationary bike. And then in the app, you can follow along with the beat. And the unique thing with that one, hardware-wise, was that it actually charges the bike when you have it on the stationary stand. So you can pedal, put your own input in. So that one's not exactly the ideal fit because it requires different mechanical hardware, and I don't know how long that's going to last, how reliable it's going to be, although it worked very well for the riding that I did on the bike and for the review that I did. Perhaps there's some way we could spin that so that app works while you're out riding without needing to run a secondary app like Strava or some other exercise app that's specifically designed for exercise. When I was reviewing the Van Powers Urban Glide, its mobile app, at first glance when I looked at it, I was like, I don't really know what the point of this one is. It could change the pedal assist settings, but you could also just do that with the buttons on the handlebars. So I wasn't sure what really the purpose of that was. But the one thing I found that was really useful is you could track your ride. So it'd open up a map. You could put in directions where you want to go. And that part of it was fine, but it didn't really work any better, I felt like, than, Google Maps or Apple's Maps or anything that's already been done for years. But what was cool was after I was done with the ride, it told me how far I went and how many watt hours out of the battery I used for that trip, which I found very useful because if you did that on a regular basis and you recorded from one location to another, I feel like that would be useful information where, oh, now I can go from this friend's house to this grocery store to this lake, and each one of these sections, I know how much battery capacity it uses. I know how big my battery is, so I know I could make it to all of those. So it wasn't done automatically, or it didn't kind of guesstimate in advance if you could do that, but it tracked it and recorded it so you could see it after the fact, which I thought was a step in the right direction. Now, I'm working on a review this week right now from a company called Favorite, and it has a mobile app as well. And this is why I'm bringing this up. It's like 3 out of 4 bikes I've been reviewing lately have a mobile app versus not. Some are very basic, but so far everyone does completely different things. Now, the Favorite e-bike is pretty cool from what I've tested so far. One of the things I like about it is that there is an integrated lock in the rear wheel. If you've seen the locks where it's mounted basically on the rear triangle of the frame, and then it has a round part that loops around the rim and the tire. So it doesn't lock it to anything. It just basically locks the wheel to the frame so it won't roll. So somebody can't hop on the bike and ride it away. Now, obviously, you'd want to supplement that with a secondary lock where it's locked to something. But if you're just hopping off the bike real quick, having that kind of lock at least makes it a little bit harder for someone to take the bike. It's somewhat of a theft deterrent. You can walk up to the bike with your phone, press unlock, and the lock undoes automatically from your phone, which I think is pretty cool. I was surprised when I did the first time. I was like, whoa, what was that noise? And I was like, That's actually super cool. And the other thing they're working on is basically having the ability to do software updates. So if they want to change things on the bike, they can do that through the mobile app. So you basically have a wireless way to get new firmware onto the display, the motor controller. That to me seems like it's going to be really valuable. We see car manufacturers doing that now, and they're increasing range, they're increasing power, by a download. We could soon have that same function built into electric bikes. So I'm excited to see where that goes. Now, I did say I don't particularly like having a mobile app being required to use a bike. So I always want some sort of backup method so there's, a physical button I can push. But what I don't mind is having access to advanced settings through a mobile app. One of the other things I've seen is BMS monitoring. Now, usually that's not a app that's built into the bike itself. It's usually a BMS that's operating on Bluetooth built into the battery. So it's like you could have a bike that has a Bluetooth BMS. You can log into that. You can see the state of your battery cells, see what the voltage is, see if it's charging properly, if it's balanced. But then you have a separate app for the bike that, has a map function. And then you have separate apps on your phones to do other things. And I think eventually we're going to start to see these things integrate and come together and be all in one. So here are the things that I think are the most important, that if you are an e-bike manufacturer developing an app, these are the things that I'm asking for right now. Like put these in. These are most important to me. Number one, because battery safety is so important and is such a big topic, I think BMS monitoring absolutely should be built into the app. Number one, if you're going to have an app, put BMS monitoring in there. So that way I can check on the status, the health of my battery in real time. There's so many advantages to doing that. I can imagine that if you have BMS monitoring, then you could also adjust BMS settings. So not only could I see if my battery is fully charged or not, I could say, oh, you know what? I'm not going to ride as far today or tomorrow, whatever it is. I don't need full capacity. I want to prolong the life of my battery. I'm going to charge to 90%. You change a setting on your phone. Now the BMS updates and it charges your battery up to 90%. We don't need a fancy charger that we have to buy separately. It could be built into the battery and into the bike from the start. You could also set timers. I want the battery to start charging, at this time when the electricity is lower, although it doesn't make that much of a difference for an e-bike. Why not? It's so easy to implement things like that. I think it should just be done. So that's the biggest thing. The main reason for that is safety. The secondary reason for that is longevity and basically saving you money, making your batteries last as long as possible. I do think security is important as well. Currently, we're buying separate locks, we're buying separate GPS trackers, we're buying Apple AirTags, whatever it is we need to do to keep our bike safe when we have it locked up. And it would be nice to have some of that built into the bike as well. Now, I've seen some companies do parts and pieces of this, but again, it's not the whole picture. They're missing one component or another. But I have seen some bikes that have a built-in GPS function, which is pretty cool. The advantage of building that into the system is now you're not carrying around a second battery that's charging the GPS. It's just drawing power from the battery that's on board. You integrate everything. It just makes everything more efficient, lighter, more user-friendly. So it would be awesome if the bike had in the app a GPS tracker. So if my bike ever disappears, I could just pull it right up on my phone and see exactly where it's at. And then if it has some hardware functions like the physical lock, like the favorite e-bike has, I think that would be cool. Other thing that I have seen on some bikes with a direct drive motor as an alternative is they actually have a function to lock up the rear wheel remotely or with a little beeper like a keychain unlock thing, whatever you call it. A key fob, that's what I was going for. Those would be cool because let's say you do see your bike stolen and it's moving, you could remotely shut it down. And I think that just increases the chances of recovery if that ever does happen. So BMS, battery monitoring, charging, that's kind of all one thing that could be done. Security is a whole nother area that I think would be useful. And then I also think maps are actually useful too. When you're riding a bike, hopefully you're going somewhere. We have apps built into our phones, Google Maps and things like I said before, but I think there is a piece that's missing, which is integrating the map with our bike's power and battery capacity. So the Van Powers bike I mentioned, you can track the ride that you just did and see what your battery usage was. I would like it to look forward, and I put in a destination, and it tells me if I have enough battery capacity to make it to that point. And to take that a step further, I think it would be cool if there was an option to say, yes, you can make it. Here is a suggested pedal assist or wattage setting that will ensure you get there. And then if you really have a lot of range anxiety, there could be an option that says, if you go at, say, a maximum of 500 watts power, guaranteed you're going to make it to this location. If you use 650 watts or 750 watts of your motor power, you might not make it, and that you could actually limit the power to guarantee you get a certain distance. Normally, I don't want to limit the power of my bike. I want to use all the power that's there. But that's an example where the map function could integrate with the battery, and it could do it in real time because it see, here's your GPS location, here's your average speed, here's where you're going to. Yes, you're on track to make it to this destination. I just think that would be super cool. It doesn't seem like it'd be that hard to implement, but I'm not a software engineer, so I don't really know. It might be more complicated. They do it in a Tesla, so it's got to work on an e-bike eventually, right? Now, the next piece of that, which goes in with maps and kind of ties back to the beginning of BMS and battery monitoring, is charging locations. I actually pitched an app like this to a group years ago, and at that point in time, most people are like, there's just not enough e-bikes on the road to justify making this app. I didn't pursue it for that reason, and also for the reason that I'm not an app developer. That's just not my area of expertise. But my thought was, why don't we have a mobile app for e-bikes that shows charging locations? Now, you might think there aren't charging locations for electric bikes, but there are. There are tens of thousands of them everywhere, all over the place. An example somebody was emailing me about was that they had planned to go to a truck stop on a road trip with their electric bike, because you can go into a restaurant and a truck stop, you can pull out your batteries. They said they called ahead and asked if they could use an outlet while they were there, and they said yes, no problem. 110-volt outlets that we all plug into to charge our bikes are everywhere. They're in restaurants, they're in grocery stores, they're in small businesses, and I think if we make that known that e-bikes can charge on a simple 110 outlet, you might have restaurants that have bike parking and a safe space to lock it up that say, yes, not only do we want you to come here and spend your money at our establishment, but we will provide a plug for you to charge. Now, there is a safety aspect of that, of course. If they want to restrict it to UL-listed batteries or have their charging station outside, or they have a fireproof box it has to go into, of course, they can do those sorts of things, because you never know what sort of battery somebody's going to have on their DIY bike that rides up. But I think there is something to that whole idea. The other thing that I have always wanted to do, and I've seen some people develop this product already, so I kind of missed the boat, but I was definitely thinking of this years ago as well, is the fact that level 2 charging stations, which are becoming more and more commonplace for electric vehicles, you can make an adapter that plugs into those, and basically you get a 110 outlet off of that. So although it's designed for a 220-volt circuit to charge electric vehicles, you can drop that down to a 110 circuit and plug in 1, 2, 3, 4. You could plug in half a dozen electric bikes into a single level 2 charging port if you had the right wiring with you. And it's a very simple, lightweight little plug that you would actually have to bring with you. So every level 2 that's open and not being used by a car could easily be used for electric bicycles as well. And if we have that built into an app that is updated and people are using it and saying, hey, here's a 110 outlet that's available and works. Here's a business that's friendly. Here's a park that has power available. It really could open up the options about where we can ride to, how far we can go. And I think it's going to open up eventually to more people riding e-bikes longer distances. You know, I'm talking about instead of going on your daily 20-mile ride, now all of a sudden you could go on a 3, 4, 5-day e-bike camping trip if you wanted to. Now, there are people already doing things like that, but they're having to figure out the challenges of, you know, how many batteries do they take? Where do they charge them? And I think if we all come together and work on something like this, we could make something really awesome. Now, that, of course, is going to take time to implement and build out, but we have to start somewhere. Those other basic functions I mentioned, BMS monitoring, a GPS that's integrated in, the map functions, the software updates, there's really no reason those can't be done right now. Now, I have to admit that no Area 13 e-bikes right now have mobile apps built in. I just haven't developed that for our bikes because I was going back to that simplistic view of I don't want a mobile app to be required to use my bike. I don't want that extra level of complication or problems. But if it adds to the experience, then I'm all for it. So it's definitely something I'm looking into now and we are considering. So we'll see where that goes over time, and I'll certainly keep you guys informed. But I do want to know in the comments, what do you think about mobile apps for electric bikes? Do you think any of these things are valuable? Would you use them? And are there things I'm missing? I'm sure there are, but I don't even know what I'm missing yet because I feel like this is just a new thing that's just up and coming. People are starting to put together, a piece here, a piece there, but the big picture has yet to fully come together. And I, for one, am excited to see what happens. Thanks for joining me on the Area 13 podcast. If you want to know more about electric bikes, check out these other episodes. Make sure to subscribe to the channel on YouTube, and I'll talk to you again soon.